Good afternoon, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation for June 11th, 2025. My name is Steve Brandt, and I'm the president of the BET. Before we begin the meeting, I would ask the clerk's office to read the reminder to the public and those who are testifying today.
Before we begin the meeting, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments.
At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify the presence of a quorum.
Commissioner Fry is absent. Abene.
Present.
Payne.
Present.
Chugtai.
Present.
Vice President Priest-Stinson is absent. President Brandt.
Present.
There are 4 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum, and here is our 5th member, and the mayor expects to attend at least part of today's meeting. I'll now offer an acknowledgement that we meet today on the land that is the traditional land of the Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples. We'll now proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access on the city's Legislative Management Information System, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Board members, the agenda for today's meeting is before us. May I have a motion to adopt, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. Next is the acceptance of minutes from the May 14th, 2025 meeting. May I please have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Is there
Second.
a second? All right, we have a proper motion before us. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the minutes are accepted as presented. I will check with the clerk. This is our public comment period. Do we have anybody signed up to testify today? Okay, we have no one signed up today, so we'll continue to the next item on our agenda. But just as a reminder, the public has an opportunity each of our meetings to comment on items that are on that day's agenda. Item number 5 is receiving the 2025 bonding resolutions, and David Wheeler, Senior Manager, will present the annual list of the not yet bonded amounts of currently authorized capital projects.
Thank you, President Brandt and Commissioners. I'm Dave Wheeler, Senior Manager. I'll just clarify, we are presenting today the authorizing and awarding resolutions for the 2025 various purpose bond issue. I was here last month to present all of the authorized projects.
You're right. It's correct on the agenda, but incorrect in my script.
Yep. So just a quick clarification there. These are the resolutions that allow us to bring the bond issue to market, accept bids from underwriters, and ultimately award a sale based on the lowest interest cost of the city for the bond issuance. I've prepared just a brief presentation to kind of detail what is in these resolutions and an overview of the issuance process this year. These are the resolutions before you. The project funding requests this year, we have a total of $146 million in project funding. Below that headline number there are the breakdown by bonding type, the levy funded debt around $80 million. Enterprise revenue-backed projects, that's utility improvements and construction projects, totaling $58 million. And then city improvements and the park board disease tree program, which are backed by special assessments of $8 million for project construction costs. These are the either expenses that have been incurred or we expect to incur over the next 12 to 18 months on the projects. We work closely with project managers and other departments to establish these spending forecasts and bring these forth for bonding this year. Just for reference, there's a total of 115 requests this year. Over on the right, the project funding requests included in Exhibits A to C in the resolutions. That's a little above the past few years. We've averaged right around 100. That increase is primarily on the levy-funded project side, so city capital infrastructure projects, which is kind of what we expected. Our capital bonding program has anticipated an increase in amount and spending over the next few years. Below is just an estimate of that estimated par amount that we would issue to raise these funds requested. We do expect again this year to receive a bit of premium on the bonds issued that would be used to reduce the overall issuance size. Of course, anything can change. It's all very preliminary, but we're expecting anywhere from $1 to maybe $5 million to reduce that overall issuance size. A quick overview of some sale considerations. We do have a planned sale for July or August. I will make a quick note. Some of the sale-specific items in the resolutions are subject to minor changes, kind of within reason. Perfect example I'll lay out is we do cite July 22nd as a sale date. That is more or less kind of a goal date that we're working towards, not a exact date of the sale yet. We will work with our municipal advisor, Ellers, to determine the best date to go to market when we expect the best bids as that date approaches. So a few other considerations or items that might impact the best sale date for us. The public release of the city's audited financial statements. We also work with rating agencies to rate this issue. So a few things that might impact when and what date we ultimately sell on. But the issue is structured to mature in 20 principal payments through 2044 with an optional redemption in 2034. And so at that point, we have the option to call bonds that are outstanding. We'll again have this issue rated by S&P and Fitch. Of course, we mentioned we do have that third rating that Moody's carries on us as an issuer related to past issues. We will, again, just have the Fitch and S&P rate this issue as we have in the past. And one final point I'll mention, there are no current refunding opportunities for the city by way of interest cost savings. It's something we monitor throughout the year. Ellers runs analysis for us throughout the year, so we are managing that and keeping eyes on that. It's something that we do take a special look at when we do a new money issue, specifically because there's always cost efficiencies to be gained from including any refundings in a new money issue. Fortunately, we aren't anywhere close to savings at this point from the callable issues, but as we progress and opportunities arise, we'll bring those to the board. And then this is just kind of a final look. I presented this slide last month and then updated it again with rates from yesterday. So as you can see, not much has changed as far as market yields. We are expecting increased interest costs over the last few years. For reference, the 2023 is that second line in green. That was about 3.75% annual interest rate. Our estimates for this year right now are right around 4% annual interest rate. So again, preliminary and things do change, but we do expect a higher interest rate costs, but notably still within our expected budgeting and pro formas for debt service, both on the debt, I should say, tax-supported side and the enterprise fund side. So at this point, nothing that changes our expectations or planning around the bond issuance, but just something to be aware of, that the market yields are higher right now, and so there will be increased cost to the city for now. And that is, again, tried to be brief, but a very quick overview and detail on the sale process. I'm happy to stand for any questions at the moment.
Do my colleagues have any questions? Okay. I have a couple minor ones. one of the resolutions references the bond committee, which is obviously a fixture within the city. Do you anticipate that our new staffer will be a participant in the bond committee?
President Brandt, yes. Currently in the debt policy, it is listed as the executive secretary to the board, but is a member of the, I believe the debt management committee is the technical label for it. But yes,
Okay.
that staff member is part of that committee.
Great. That was my recollection, but I just wanted to refresh myself on that. And then the municipal advisor apparently has not yet been designated. It's a selection made by the CFO.
President Brandt, our municipal advisor is Ellers and Associates.
Okay. I thought the resolution said to be designated, but maybe that's just a minor detail.
I would have to reference the language specifically.
I remember Ehlers
as
did
an
come
advisor,
before us.
It will be Ellers, yeah.
Excuse me. Okay. I thought it might be educational for the public to just get a sense of what some of this money is going to go to work doing. It's a long list, so I won't attempt to read it all, but we have three buckets, essentially. One is the $8 million bucket, and that deals mainly with street resurfacings and disease tree removal that will be repaid by property owners to the city. There's another bucket of utility projects, and those are things like pumps to pump water and sewage around, storm tunnel repairs, water facility improvements, and so on. Then there's our biggest bucket is essentially projects that people probably more typically see the benefit from. And for example, there'll be public art at the Upper Harbor, pedestrian bike safety improvement projects, traffic lights. The farmers market is slated for some improvements. The South Minneapolis Community Safety Center, which I believe will be the new home of the 3rd Precinct, is also on the list. That's the biggest project. And for those of you who like parks, there's going to be work financed by this bond issue at Elliott Park, East Phillips Park, Farview Park, Audubon Park, Bohannon Park, Cleveland Park, and Stewart Park. So I just thought that might put a little more of a face on how the money's going to be put to work. And if there are no more questions, Commissioner Benny.
Thank you, President Brandt. Just since you named the park projects, one thing that's notable to me in the list of projects, and one thing I think that's commendable that the Park Board does, is there's a lot of transparency around our projects, our CIP, and it's just part of that. So we have specific park projects, not categorical areas of spending. The city does a little bit more of that, which is fine. But I think it's good for the public to be able to see that we're bonding for specific planned improvements in the parks that are in a 6-year window and a 6-year view. So thanks for letting me say that.
And Commissioner Priest-Henson?
2 questions. One process question. The specific projects that is related to the Emerald Ash Borer, are we able to pull that out and vote specifically on that one project?
I will let Mr. Hammer deal with that. I know that in the past we have been told that we can't take individual projects out of the list that precedes this.
Commissioner Brandt, Commissioners, you can amend the resolution to remove projects. Just what you're mentioning is when the list of things comes from the council, we're just accepting a list that's been provided to us, so there's no real reason to amend it. But this is a resolution authorizing the bonds that the board is taking, and it can be amended.
All right, and I suppose in order to deal with, do you have more to say, Commissioner Priest-Henson?
One, I wanted to say that so that the public is aware on whether we could do that or not, and I wanted to make sure that we could. I would actually like to do that. The other thing that I would like to do is follow up. I don't think, maybe somebody here is able to speak to it, but I would like follow up after this meeting, specifically about, there was some work that was done at the state to alleviate some of the pressure on homeowners, specifically lower income homeowners, especially those on the north side who were deeply impacted by the emerald ash borer removals. And so I'm just curious if we can get that information on what was that work that was done at the state to help alleviate, just so that we're aware of that work that happened outside of our Minneapolis government body. I would like that information.
All right, I suspect staff is not prepared to answer that question today. I think before we talk about, excuse me, Commissioner.
I know some about what's been done. There have been a variety of different philanthropic efforts that have actually yielded results, including being able to go back and pay for people who had already paid the assessment. So what this particular assessment will do, it's essentially for trees that will be removed during this calendar year, or so that we get reimbursed and we can pay the contractors to remove the trees. But these are the ones that would be anticipated on private property up to that amount, but not necessarily that amount. So citywide, that's what this is for. That's the typical way of doing it, but there's now an off-ramp for people that qualify based on a bunch of different criteria for reimbursement or waiving and things like that.
I think that the first step we should take before Commissioner Priest-Stinson presents whatever amendment she wants to present is to move the resolutions. I would ask the clerk for guidance on whether we would move them together or whether each needs to be moved separately.
You can move them both together as one. Or separately. It's up to the chair's discretion.
Commissioner Priest-Stinson.
Essentially, what I'm asking is for a roll call vote specifically on that project so that it's pulled out and specifically folks can see where we aligned on that particular issue is what I would be asking for us to do.
Okay.
Just to clarify what my ask is.
I think that the only way to get a roll call vote specifically on that project would be an amendment to do something with it, typically to delete, but first, can we have a motion to move the two bonding resolutions that are before us?
I'll move the 2025 authorizing, well, I don't see the resolution on here. I'll move the two bonding resolutions.
All right, there's been a motion made. Is there a second? Any discussion? Commissioner Priest-Stinson, would you like to make a motion?
So to clarify the clarifying, we cannot do a roll call vote specifically on the project. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, to Commissioner, Vice Chair, Vice President Priest-Stinson's question, I'm kind of thinking this through at the moment. Because this is part of a resolution, removing this has implications kind of throughout the resolution by changing the dollar amounts. So to me, it would make more sense to deal with this as an amendment rather than to kind of pull out one by one without being able to kind of, because specifically this resolution has a higher vote threshold than other resolutions, it requires 2/3 of the body's membership rather than, that's correct, yeah, 2/3 of the body's membership to authorize bond sales, which means there's a hard 4. So I'm not sure we could really kind of take out just this one project because it would, again, have implications in the rest of the resolution.
So just if I could clarify that, if you're saying it's possible to delete a specific project, and Commissioner Priest-Stinson, do you want to go that direction and
Point
make
of
a motion?
information, Mr. Chair, point of information.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I really apologize. I'm hoping that this will seek to help us get closer to a resolution. Commissioner Mr. Chair, I have a question for Commissioner Priest-Stinson. I'm wondering if she can just repeat which items she is talking about in the resolution, and let's see if we can just quick whip up an amendment. I think that's very doable.
It's specifically I'd have to look up the project code. I'm having IT issues with my laptop, so I can't pull up the actual project code, so if my colleagues could help here, but the project code that is specific to the emerald ash borer removal.
Is that the
Mr. President?
disease tree removal? Okay.
Yes.
And Mr. President, if it's okay, I think we can certainly handle kind of the implications of that amendment. I'm not necessarily sure we need to get a written amendment prepared at this moment. What I am suggesting is I think the process of considering these items separately would need to be handled via an amendment, rather than just kind of voting separately on the project.
So just, again, I want to continue. I'm not done with my point of information.
Okay.
Then would it be, Mr. Clerk, would it be appropriate then at this time for Commissioner Priest-Stinson to make an amendment to consider those two items first?
And Commissioner Priest-Stinson, I have the two numbers, if you would like to make a motion to delete the diseased tree portion of the assessment.
That is the motion that I would like to make.
Okay, so,
So that we can just vote on that, and then we can move forward with however we move, but that would be what I would like to do.
okay, so it's 2023 R 384 and 2024 R 444. And are you moving the deletion of those two items?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Chutai. All right, we have a motion before us. Is there any discussion on the motion? Right?
President Brandt, if I could say
Certainly.
something. President Brandt and members of the board, I'm Alan Hoppy, Director of Banking, Investments, and Debt. The disease tree projects fall under the accessible projects. When we bring them to you, we're seeking financial reimbursement for work that has already been done. So the time to weigh in on projects where you would maybe not want something done or do want something done is earlier on in the whole process. At this point in time, the city has spent the money and property owners are being assessed. This was typically done at the end of December for collection in subsequent years. So all we're doing right now is providing a financial mechanism for the city to get reimbursed, and over the period of time that taxpayers are repaying these assessments corresponds with the bond maturities that we have planned.
I think that's very helpful information for us to have, Mr. Hoppy. And so you're saying this is essentially the financing mechanism for work that's already been done.
That is correct.
All right. We have a motion before us. Is there any more discussion? Commissioner Priest-Stinson, your light is on.
Yes. With that being said, is this just taking care of the past work, Mr. Hoppy? Is there future work that this would also be reimbursing?
President Brandt and commissioners, this is referring just to past work that has been assessed as of the end of this most recent December. I can't speak for any work that happened last month or any of that kind of stuff, but this is just stuff that's already been packaged up, and we're just doing the financial part of paying for all the actions and the physical work that's already happened.
So there would potentially then be a future bonding that would come before us for future work at the beginning of the process, in which the thing that I'm trying to do now would be more appropriate. Would that be fair?
President Brandt and members of the commission, board here, I guess that would be correct. Again, I would go back to the entire capital process and the queue that happens to the budgeting aspect, and knowing when a project is introduced, presented,
Right.
and coming up for discussion and voting. Most of that's, of course, happening on the city side or the park board in their particular case. When we're coming to the board, or the finance department, we're coming basically twice, once to show you the list of all authorized projects. You did see this a couple weeks ago. And now we're coming to just do the financing.
Okay. What I want to make sure that I'm not doing, or that anybody would be doing, is essentially pencil whipping something. It's something that will end up coming up in further discussion, so I won't get into it now as far as work plan. It'll be something that I want to be closely monitored and tracked, so that we can be at the beginning of the process where we can take a vote that matters and isn't holding up financials for work that's already been done. What I want to make sure is I'm not pencil whipping a decision that's going to cause further harm, specifically to any resident that is of low income, but specifically in this case, low-income Black people on the north side and people in Northeast. It has been a large problem. It has been very painful. It has impacted me as well. And so I just want to make sure that I am not making a decision that's going to cause further harm. If my understanding is correct, that this is just a reimbursement, and at a later date, if future work is done, there would be an appropriate time of which there would be a vote that we could take to, within the decisions that we're allowed to make, stop the process from happening before there's money to be reimbursed, then I would rescind my motion and we can go ahead and move forward. But if that's not the case, then I would vote, then I would keep my amendment on the table.
If I could jump in here, my understanding from our attorney is that when the authorized but not issued list is brought to us by staff, and I think we typically receive and file it, we are not free to delete.
President Brandt, Commissioners, yes, that's correct. So I think what's happening here is that the City Council has the authority, depending on whether it's state law or charter, although I think it's mostly state law assessments that get done, to levy the assessments and to approve the projects. And so those assessment, Mr. Hoppe can correct me if I'm going out of my lane here, but those assessments may be paid over a 20-year period pursuant to the assessment law, but we need the money to do the project that's been approved now. So what this is just doing is getting the city the money to pay for the project today instead of have those funds come in over a 20-year period. So that's what's happening. So the decision to assess property or undertake a project does not come before the board, but the decision to finance those assessments over time is a bond issuance that comes before the board.
If I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, Commissioner Priest-Stinson's desire to be able to stop things further on is not within the power of the Board of Estimate. So I don't want to mislead you that you'll have an opportunity to keep this from happening in the future if you withdraw the amendment.
I just have one other question. It's a larger question. In as much brief summary as you can provide, Mr. Hoppe, what would be the impact of the city having to wait 20 years to get these payouts rather than the money coming now? What impact would that have, in your opinion?
President Brandt and commissioners, basically it's negative cash flow for the city, so the city has spent the money and is looking to recover that cash, and so having to wait multiple years to collect that means the rest of the city taxpayers are basically funding that on an interim basis, the interest cost.
Commissioner Priestinson, what's your pleasure on your amendment?
With that being said, that causes more harm to the exact people that I'm talking about, so I will rescind the motion, but this will come up at a later date on another topic about how this board works in concert in collaboration with our other layers of government. Do any of my other colleagues want to, I think that's the most appropriate thing to say at the moment, that there's a need for better coordination because this is not a pencil whipping commission where we just sign off on things because other people have already done the work. That shouldn't be our intention, and it isn't. So I just think that this is an opportunity, this is an example to have better coordination and working with one another so that we don't end up here. My concern is valid. I don't think anybody's saying that it's not, but it's certainly a conundrum. And by keeping my amendment on the table, I would end up likely causing more harm if the vote went that way. I think one of my colleagues wants to weigh in, so before I choose to rescind, I'd like to hear from my colleagues first before I decide. Thank
Commissioner
you.
Payne.
Thank you, Chair Brandt. It sounds to me that the upstream decision point here is a city council decision point, and I know there's a lot of interest on city council around assessments and equity, and I think that you're exactly correct in recognizing that we need to close this feedback loop between these two decisions. These feel very disconnected and siloed, and it sounds to me that there would be an additional harm to vote this down today or delete this. It would create cash flow problems for the city and put a hole in a budget that's already quite tight. But I think there is something that we need to do in thinking more deeply about how we leverage assessment as a funding mechanism for some of this work, and what's the right balance between assessments versus levy when it comes to doing this work. And I think I would happily set up time to meet to talk about that, and I think we should probably get some professional staff involved in that conversation, and maybe for a later part of our agenda we can talk about what it means to have professional staff for BET and following up on these discussions. So
Commissioner Priestinson, in my understanding, Commissioner Benny.
Thank you. I also want to say, and actually that was a good comment to make, because the Emerald Ash Borer issue particularly did have a lot of community outcry. And so a lot of aspects of it were addressed in terms of the ameliorating the impacts in many ways. But I would say what Commissioner Payne just mentioned, really there are special assessments for other types of things as well, street improvements, and I think a broader discussion, because when the park board and others, there was a city, there's a city tree coordinator, I'm sorry, I don't know what title, but those two, between the park board and that individual and department, a lot was done to bring in things specifically for the private property tree assessments, disease tree assessments, that really did, I think, help, because I'll say, as a commissioner, the amount that I hear about it has reduced dramatically. So that's a measure I have. So, but I think looking at assessments in general, yeah, they're a problem. It's a big impact to people because it can be a big bill. So, okay, thank you for the discussion.
Commissioner
So with that being
Priestinson.
said, I will rescind my motion. And with my commitment to have these follow-up discussions, I appreciate what my colleagues have shared. And what has been exposed in this one example, and also my commitment to equity, which I've brought up multiple times on why this board needs to have its own equity assessments that are separate from CLIC and any other body that does their own assessments, because there is an equity analysis that is needed here, and this is a firm example of that equity analysis that's missing, and what ends up happening when you add the additional insult of there just not being the coordination there, because we just haven't prioritized that before. But it sounds like we're going to prioritize it now. I will rescind my motion, and we can move forward with taking our vote. Thank you.
All right, in that case, the two motions to one authorizing the authorizing bond resolution and the bond award resolution are before us. We're taking them as a package, and as I understand it, we need a roll call vote because it's a resolution, and probably because we're also authorizing the borrowing of money. And 4 votes will be required for this matter to pass, and the clerk will call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fry is absent. Abene.
Aye.
Payne.
aye.
Chugtai.
Aye.
Vice President Priestinson.
Aye.
President Brandt.
Aye.
There are 5 ayes.
Okay, that measure is passed, and I thank staff for their patience. It's probably the longest bonding presentation you've made in some time, but we got some things out on the table, and that's good. Now, item number 6 is the current service level budget and sources of revenue update, which will be presented to us by the Finance Department, Justin Coles and Jane DeSenza. And feel free. Did you all bring a dinner with you?
Good evening, President Brandt and Commissioners. I'm Jane DeSenza, the Budget Director here at the City with Finance and Property Services. And I'm joined today by Budget Manager Justin Coles, who will be up here in a few minutes to discuss the 2026 current service level budget calculations. So these are the estimated revenues and expenses for the following year. Were we to take no action to increase or decrease our expectations for the following supplemental year. So differently than in prior years, the current service level is not really the starting point for this year's budget decision-making. It's really more serving as a reference point. So in deference to the property tax projections that we're going to be discussing throughout, our budget process this year did not invite new spending proposals from departments, and so instead we're focused more on constraining growth. Nevertheless, this is an important marker, reference point for all of you and for the public, and is also required by our financial policies and our charter. So the information that we'll get into in these slides is the result of many months of work by our team as well as other partners in the enterprise. Some of us are here from the budget division, but not everyone, so I'd just like to note that this presentation represents their work and their service to the people of Minneapolis, so we're very lucky to have such a strong team. This is a technical presentation that's focused on future revenues and expenses, and you can expect to hear more programmatic information through the budget committee process in the fall. And you will also see some references to historical actuals in these slides, again included as a reference, but will be focused more on next year's projections. So our agenda for today is to review that budget framework, including the estimated costs of those existing ongoing commitments. We'll compare throughout to our 2025 adopted budget. We'll have some discussion of both property taxes and non-property tax revenues with a focus on the general fund. We'll tie things out with the general fund outlook, so how our expenses and revenues stacking up, and then we'll go to our timeline and next steps for the fall. So some key takeaways. With many decision points to come, this being just one stop on the process to a balanced budget, we are seeing, when looking both at all funds and refining down to the general fund, that expenses are outpacing revenues. So when looking at all funds, you can see that expenses are projected to increase at about 1.1%, while revenues are at about 0.17%. This is, with several funds yet to be finalized, so we'll be continuing, as we always do, to refine the capital enterprise grants and downtown assets funds over the summer. When we look at the general fund, you can see that expenses are increasing by 3.89%, while revenues are coming in closer to 3.64%. So these are modest gaps between revenues and expenses, which is fairly typical at this time of year. But we are seeing, increasing personnel costs, while revenue growth is much more modest. Just to note, last year at this time, we had a much more dramatic gap between expenses and revenues than we're seeing this year. So this is, in many respects, a much more stable position. So as we talk about the general fund, we wanted to give you a visual of how that relates to the other funds. So when looking at our 2026 current service level, the general fund is about 63% as it relates to other special revenue funds, so the grants, debt service, and capital projects. All of these funds have descriptions in the budget book, and we're happy to help you find those if you have any further clarifications that you're seeking on those. This This image is meant to illustrate the distribution of property tax versus non-property tax revenues that are coming in to support the general fund. So the story that it's telling, and is consistent when we looked at prior years, is that property taxes are supporting, to an increasing degree, the revenues. The overall share of property tax is shown on the bottom in blue versus the non-property tax revenues, so things like fines and fees, licenses. In the past, those non-property tax revenues were picking up more of the proportionally, and we're seeing that property taxes are slowly but surely ticking up in their importance. Okay. And so on this slide, just to remind us all where we ended the year with the 2025-2026 adopted budget, we've put a box around the levy numbers for those 2 years. And the percentage, as a reminder, is the percent change in the dollars that we're collecting from one year to the next. And so due to some cuts for the 25 levy, that percentage dropped a couple points down to 6.8% for 2025. Those one-time reductions, though, come back in 2026, and so we see 10.8% of the levy was the starting point for 2026. So double-digit levies are certainly not the norm, and so that's something we were mindful of starting the year. And since then, we've reforecasted revenue as well as expenses and our internal service charges. And so the new sort of preliminary number, starting point for decision-making, is that 11.2% levy for 2026. Primarily, this is due to increased costs.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Director, you lost me there.
Yep.
Where is the 11?
The 11.2% is in the red box on the screen, and so that's the 2026 estimated property tax levy increase. So that's
Okay.
the percent change from the $25 amount.
My version says 10.8. Is that just an earlier version?
I think that's the prior, if you switch to the next slide
Oh,
there.
got it,
Yeah,
got it.
I'm trying to illustrate
you.
the flow over time.
Thank you.
But thank you for clarifying that. So that's just an illustration of what happens when we reforecast those expenses and we capture, any new, whether those were new union agreements or reclassifications of positions, job studies, that sort of a thing. Those are all captured there. Did want to note that we plan for normal inflation going forward. We do not plan for any new spending to come into those years following 2027 and beyond. We also assume that federal funding continues. So that is an important caveat to note for future decisions. In this visual, all other levies besides the general fund are shown as consistent with what was adopted in December. So I think some things to note, the permanent improvement levy has a little bit more congestion in 26 and 27, and then sort of stabilizes in 28 and beyond. The park board levy was a subject of discussion last year, and so in sort of the inverse scenario with the overall city levy, park board's levy had a one-time increase in 2025, which has sort of shrunk the percent change between 25 and 26. And also just to note that we have a number of pension levies that are part of the city's commitments. We continue to analyze those annually with the controller team help to make sure that we're levying enough. We'll revisit those if we're able to make or need to make any changes there. We'll recommend that for August as well. Many of those will expire in 2031. So next year at this time, you'll see a year without those pension levies in our long-range financial plan. And then finally, just to reiterate, I think we've heard from the mayor and the council, and certainly President Brandt, that this sort of high property tax levy is not desirable and not something that we want for the people of Minneapolis. And so we're continuing to work to find ways to bring that number down. And then the final slide from me before Budget Manager Coles comes up here is just a note on the capital improvement program. So this shows what was adopted in '25 for the 6-year plan. So no changes here, but you can see that the planned amount for 2026 sort of functions as the current service level for capital. So that's $267.8 million. We are well on our way with the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee's process this year. They're the resident body that reviews capital budget requests from the Park Board, from the city, and from the MBC. And it is a really robust job that they do. They have 2 full days of presentations on all those capital budget requests and ask some really tough questions, offer critiques and positive feedback where it's warranted. And so we're happy to support that process. This year, they're considering 136 different capital budget requests, which over the 6 years totals about $1.95 billion. And with that, I'll invite Justin Coles.
I wonder if would this be an appropriate point to stop and ask if there are questions for what we've heard already? Commissioner Benny.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And I actually went back and looked at last year's because I was preparing for this meeting, and I was happy to get this presentation today. In the future, if we could get it a little bit earlier, because I do have a day job.
Sure.
Don't tell my employer I looked at this presentation during my day job hours today. But so one thing I want to just point out, and I'm glad you said that, Director DeSenza, if you could go back a couple of slides, the 25 year, the previous one, the adopted. So if you look up there on the Park Board line item for 26, do you see we have projected now for this year from the city and an adopted budget of 1.37%. Last year when we were figuring out how to increase the amount for the Park Board, that number was 2.6%. So even though we agreed to get like 0.2% more for the Park Board for this calendar year, I don't think that we knew that that was going to diminish the amount we got in 26. But it looks like, the Park Board didn't have a chance to weigh in on that 26 number, and it was apparently adopted by the City Council, and I'm sure no one was looking at that line item. So I don't really like that. I don't think that's great that that happened to the Park Board. And then if you could go to the next slide. And also, I would say for this count, for 26, we were projecting that we need something like 6%, and we brought that up last year, but whatever. But this slide's kind of interesting. So I think there's a misnomer here, and I can't speak to the line items really below the Park Board per se. There are other entities in there, like Housing Authority and so on, but this is current service levels. So if you'll note from this previous slide, the adopted budget for the first line item, general fund, it was in the 13%. In order to maintain service levels, that's what this means, right? The city's line item would have to go to 14%, but the Park Board's still at 1.37%. And actually, we've done an analysis to say, actually for the Park Board to maintain service levels, rec center hours, people that work with youth, mowing the grass, ice skating rinks, the list goes on. Our number would actually be, based on our current projections, 7.7%. And so this is not actually a current service level. In the red box, that's a combined average, a combined total of the levy across all of the items in that. So I think it's just really important for my colleagues up here to understand the Park Board's in trouble for next year, and I will be talking to all of you about that. But this represents actually layoffs and cuts to the Park Board. So, okay, thank you.
All right, are there additional questions? All right, I have a few, my traditional few. I read through the document today, and having been the messenger, I had to remind myself, don't shoot the messenger when they bring bad news. First, regarding the general fund expenses, one of our hefty expenses in the recent past was the new police contract, which made a conscious effort to make Minneapolis more competitive so that we could rebuild the force in response to requests from the citizens of Minneapolis. And then, of course, we have the normal, regular increase from year to year for police and other city employees. Are there any tales from the extraordinary bump that don't phase in until 2026 for police, or is it just their normal contractual increase? Did all of the big bump come for 2025?
President Brandt, I believe it was all in effect prior. I think last year was a big year for contract settling, so we had police, fire, and labor's contract, I believe, were some of the big ticket items, and so certainly those contracts are playing a role.
Okay. And then the property tax levy burden chart that shows the increasing reliance on the property tax. Is that, I assume from the numbers that that's a general fund chart? Okay, thank you. So what this is showing is the property taxpayers of the city are bearing an increasing share of the burden of the general fund. And of course, within that, we also know that because of the downtown slump, people who live in homes that they own, as well as some of those who are living as tenants in apartments, are bearing an increasing share to offset the loss of downtown value. Okay, and I guess I'm just talking out loud about that, but it's notable. And I think that's all I had. Thank you. So,
Okay.
Justin,
All right.
if you want to proceed, thank you.
Proceed.
I'm sorry, we have one question?
Yeah, just, thank you, Mr. President. I apologize, Justin. I'm really sorry. Just something that caught my attention was Commissioner Benet's comments regarding the adopted 5-year financial direction and the share of resources for the park board. So just went back and pulled up, it took me by surprise. I have no memory of us ever lowering. No, I'm serious. I have no memory of us ever voting to lower the amount of share that you received in 2026. I'm not asking you to tell me that I didn't do something wrong here. I know I didn't. But I think the distinction here, just looking at the recommended budget when it came out, which you're correct, the percentage was 2.6, and then the 2026 budget as it was adopted, the percentages are different. The dollar value is the exact same. So I just don't think it's fair to say that the city, anyone here, mayor, council, staff, somehow has shortchanged the park board. You're getting the same exact dollar value. The numbers look a little different. Thank you. Was that what you were going to say, Director?
Through the president, yes, thank you. I mean, I think the percent change, we do often get caught up on that percentage, but it is the overall dollar amount. And certainly, I know we're having conversations with Park Board ongoing, and we'll have more full conversations about the levy expectations soon. So I look forward to that and anticipate, we'll have a full discussion of that in August and September as well.
If I could piggyback, I had a chance to do a little calculation while you were answering that question. And notice under the capital improvement plan investments, I'm just looking at the bottom lines here. We have a council adopted capital improvement plan of $279 million in 2025. On one in 2026, it's planned of almost 267, so roughly the same. But then if you take the 4 out years after that, they average $252 million per year, which sounds like cutting back on capital improvements. And I'm wondering if the council members would care to comment on whether that's a conscious decision to short in capital improvements because of other demands on the budget, or
I'm happy to address that if you.
Very good. Go ahead.
President Brandt, that's a good flag. I think there's often a fine line of, budget works closely with our banking, investment, and debt team who were here earlier to develop what we think are responsible targets for levy-funded debt in particular. That's the item that is usually the topic of discussion. And we do often want to preserve some room in the out years so that future policymakers can, so that we're not fully exhausting our debt capacity, 5 years in advance. And so we did have a number of projects in 25, 26, and 27 that were time sensitive, in part due to the settlement agreement, that we had to really bump up the amount that we were spending on with levy funded debt in those first few years. We revisit that strategy annually, and so we are doing our best to maximize responsibly our debt capacity so that we can get those core services done for the city.
Could you just give me, so I can understand better, if you recall off the top of your head, some of the time-sensitive improvements that you had to do to live up to commitments, basically?
Yes, and this was a point of diversion between the mayor and council budget and the CLIC report last year. There are a number of settlement agreement requirements, like refurbishing police precincts that MDHR, the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, has committed us to doing. There are, a new 4th precinct building, a training facility. Those are things that our monitor has said we need to do, and so we had to find space for them in the budget.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your making that more concrete. I was one of those who in years past placed a low priority on replacing a relatively new building at the 4th precinct, but I'm not on the council, so I don't make those decisions. Thank you for answering, and Justin, if you want to proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Brandt and Commissioners. My name is Justin Coles, Budget Manager. So we'll now transition into the details of the current service level. We'll talk about underlying methodology and the component parts of the CSL. The objective here is to provide you with sufficient contextual information to understand trends that we're seeing in both revenues and expenditures. Throughout the presentation, you'll see references to our financial policies. We provide these so that you can dig in further as needed. As a reminder, those policies are voted on by the council and informed by industry best practices and city and state ordinances. So moving right in. So the CSL presentation and underlying data does not bind this board or the city council to any action regarding the budget, but it explains where the budget currently sits to inform the setting of the maximum tax levy later this year. The following information I will share about what the CSL is derived from the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities. The CSL services multi-purposes. Primarily, it indicates what the city would have to spend to maintain programs at current levels with current revenue estimates and known expenditure growth in the absence of any policy changes. It reflects the impact of factors that cause year-to-year variations in service costs, such as changing wage levels, economic and demographic shifts, as well as financial impacts of policy decisions. The CSL is essential for transparency and accountability because it lets the public and elected officials see what the budget really costs. It's also a budget methodology used by states and municipalities around the country. It provides a baseline projection and tells how much it will cost the city to deliver the same services and goods in the following year. It's also important to note what it is not. The CSL is not well suited for retroactive analyses into previous year spending. Rather, it's a tool to inform current and future year decision making. In summary, it's used for calculating the fiscal impact of future policy changes. Without having this baseline, it's hard to see the true effect of those changes. The figures we will present today are a snapshot in time, but we find that they're crucial for decision-making around the levy. As we've discussed, the city uses a current service level method of budgeting, as defined by our financial policies. In those policies, it states that any ongoing service level commitments from a prior year constitute the starting point for the next year. Finance and Property Services, in conjunction with other internal service providing departments, work annually to determine the costs for the continuation of our services. The financial policy section goes on to state that any requests for new spending are received and weighed against all other requests via the unified budget process. While this is one of many budget methodologies, it effectively limits growth within discretionary budget expenditures, putting that decision-making authority in the mayor and the council. There are 3 expense components that make up the current service level budget in addition to revenues. Those 3 include personnel costs, which includes all of the wage and fringe expenses for enterprise staff. Personnel is inflated year over year to account for planned step increases, COLAs, and labor agreement settlements. Moving on, base expenses are all other non-personnel expenses, and under our financial policies, these are held flat year over year. Finally, internal service charges are calculated from internal service departments who provide goods and services to customer departments within the city. These account for the cost of a variety of services, including fleet, rent, liability insurance, and others. Internal service charges are adjusted year over year based on anticipated costs of these overhead goods and services. So starting at the left side of this slide, we see a graphic of the 25 adopted budget components. We begin 2026 CSL development using 2025 adopted budget data from these 4 components. Then one-time expenditures are removed from the 2025 adopted budget, so only ongoing expenditures are included in 2026. Personnel expenses go through a similar annual review, and this review is pertinent as these expenses are a significant portion of the total city operating budget. Additionally, Budget and HR have been working in recent years to both improve the accuracy of this data on existing staffing levels and compensation, as well as make sound projections for future growth. Next is the internal service fund allocation process. So during this process, provider departments estimate their expenses for providing goods and services to their customers. Then they allocate out these costs according to predetermined allocation models. Lastly, customer departments review those charges for inclusion in the CSL. We also forecast 2026 revenues. Revenue forecasts are based on collaboration between departments and budget in which impacts on revenue streams are assessed. These impacts include generally how sensitive or stable the revenue stream is, assessing if there are trends in growth or decline. Are there any new revenue sources? And also looking at internal and external drivers to determine the next 5-year outlook. Each of these processes has now been completed, and we will provide comparative detail of those inputs. So over the next few slides, we'll be diving into a snapshot of the current service level expense budget for 26. While this is just one side of the equation, it's prudent to understand the current cost of the 2025 budget. Most of this slide is focused on the general fund, as that is where a majority of our programs are budgeted. It's heavily funded by property taxes, and it's where strategic decisions are made to get us to an adopted budget in December. It is important to note here that this is the cost of last year's budget today, but does not include any new spending or prioritization of programs. Across all city funds, the budget team worked to identify and remove $12 million of one-time or expiring programs on the road to building the CSL. This is inclusive of one-time funding as well as other components of the budget that are due to expire in the current year. That removal was in line with the adopted plan, so can really be seen more as a technical necessity towards creating the CSL rather than additional savings to balancing. Collectively, salary, other pays, and fringe costs initially increased $30 million based on the 2025 budget, and internal service charges by $6 million. This $30 million was then brought down to the 23.7 that you see on the screen due to modifications in how the city budgets for vacant positions, as well as blended assumption based on historical healthcare elections. Those savings are primarily reflected within the salary and fringe cost categories. While policy allows for cost escalation within workforce costs and internal service charges, the discretionary base does not receive the same treatment. The base in most cases is held flat year to year to ensure that the executive and legislative body receive those requests to increase a budget and can equitably consider that amongst all other requests. This portion of the budget includes things like training, contracts, and operating supplies. If a department wants to increase their base, whether it be to cover existing programs or to put forth new, they must submit a new budget proposal to do so, and that is reviewed alongside all other proposals. This decision authority is called out in Financial Policy 1.5.1. So diving a bit deeper into personnel costs within the general fund, with over 4,000 FTEs budgeted for the city, personnel is a significant portion of our costs. We work closely with our partners in HR and each department to complete our annual review of personnel expenses in accordance with our financial policies, finalizing budgeted FTE counts and salary and fringe for each position to develop a comprehensive position-by-position workforce plan. Salary and fringe have both increased in the 2026 CSL over what was included in the 25 adopted budget. Growth in salaries is outpacing growth in fringe, which is primarily driven by collective bargaining agreements being settled at salary increases higher than what was historically negotiated. These agreements impact both steps as well as cost of living adjustments for positions represented by those units.
The Budget Division plans for annual increases in personnel costs based on growth assumptions that we revisit annually in collaboration with HR. The 2026 CSL General Fund budget for salaries and wages and fringe currently sits at about $4 million above what had been planned. This is primarily attributed to administrative ads, reclassifications, job maintenance studies, and labor agreements settling variance to plan. We continue to work with the Labor Relations Division of HR to ensure we are in alignment on cost projections for unsettled contracts. One final slide on personnel. So if we look at FTE growth dating back to 2023, we do see steep inclines in 24, more modest in 25, and going into 26, there's a plan for about just under 16 FTEs to be added. Those FTEs are primarily within the fire department with a federal grant expiring in mid-2026. This only captures positions added as of March. New positions do continue to be added time to time via council action, and those will not be shown in this personnel budget, but get picked up in the 27 budget calculations. So I'm now going to turn to that second input, which is internal service charges. This category of expenditures includes charges for fleet, IT, rent on lease spaces, workers' compensation and liability, and general fund overhead. In January of each year, we ask the departments who provide these services to generate an expense budget request that maintains current service levels within demand. Budget staff then review those proposals and present recommendations to the CFO, budget director, and controller, and a final determination is made about what level to fund in the following year. We followed the same process this year as in prior years, and all told, these make up 17% of general fund expenditures. On this slide is the output of that submittal and analysis within the general fund. Cost distributions are determined using various methodologies, such as customer department FTE counts, historical spending, department-specific projects and needs, and for workers' comp and liability, a report from our actuarial consultant, Pinnacle. Notably, many of these charges are demand-driven, so there's little surprise to the receiving department of these costs. I also want to note that changes in personnel costs can have a cumulative effect on growth in these charges because the personnel costs of the internal service department are a significant driver of the costs that they then allocate out. Therefore, position adds not only increase a department's personnel budget lines, they also increase the internal service charges as there's an assumption that that department will consume greater service levels. The accountants for these funds have finalized the charges for 2026, and we're seeing that internal service charges to the general fund are increasing by about $6.4 million between 2025 adopted budget and 2026 CSL. General fund departments are provided the budget to pay for these charges each year, so any changes, either up or down, have no operational impacts on the programs they provide. Now we'll transition to hear about how we're paying for the expenses by looking at our completed revenue forecast. Most of the non-levy revenues are final at this point, although certain intergovernmental and other revenues may still see some adjustment as we progress towards the recommended budget release. Our revenue forecasts are the result of close collaboration between our office and subject matter experts from across the city. I want to take a moment to thank the many individuals who contributed to shaping this outlook, especially our dedicated budget staff. Their hard work has been instrumental in helping us limit unnecessary increases to the tax levy. Before zeroing in on the general fund, a very quick look at enterprise-wide revenues into all funds. This view here includes the general fund, special revenue funds, debt funds, and others. I will note that enterprise funds, grants, downtown assets, and capital are still under development, which is just a reality of data availability and planned budget milestones. These will be finalized through the month of July and definitely by August. This visual is showing net local options sales tax revenues, which are the groupings of local sales taxes that fund our assets, operations, debt service for those assets, and economic development related activities. In terms of gross revenues, after nearly hitting pre-pandemic levels in 2022, we well surpassed them in 23. That resulted in a 10% year-over-year growth, which has since cooled down to 7%. More specifically, we saw roughly $92 million in gross revenues in 2018 and 2019. We surpassed that in 2023 with $100 million and are planning for $115.3 million in 2026. Estimates are reached by reviewing trends in historical actuals, recovery, and taking into consideration other forecasts, like the Minnesota Management and Budget's annual economic outlook, which is published in February. To dive a bit deeper on these revenues, 2025 Q1 gross revenues are roughly $2.5 million higher than the 2024 Q1 revenues.
Excuse me, I wondered if I could,
Yeah.
did you say 115 million was the projected amount?
That is correct, for 2026.
I'm seeing,
These are, I might have misspoke, these are net receipts. So 115 is the gross.
thank you
And I'll
very
get in a
much.
second into the
Thank you.
withholdings. Yep, apologies. So 2025 Q1 gross revenue is about $2.5 million higher than the same time period last year. We did see a lag in Q1 of '24, however, that the year did finish strong, so it was seen as an outlier. One final note about withholdings, which is the variance between the gross and the net. So there are essentially two buckets of withholdings within these tax revenues. The first one is the Minnesota DOR admin fee, which historically has been about 1.35%. That was dropped down to 0.9% last year, and we anticipate that to continue going forward. Additionally, there are state-bonded debt service withholdings that are mandated and fixed, and there are variable withholdings for the Minneapolis Sports Facility Authority that is dependent on the amount of revenues we receive. Though we're still finalizing the downtown assets plan, we can incorporate the final 2024 actuals and ending fund balance, the updated loss revenue forecast, and the updated general fund transfer to determine how these elements are impacting the outlook. So this chart will show you the 6-year outlook from 2025, which projected the fund balance dropping from 83 million down to 57 million in 2030. That recalculated outlook today shows 85 million in 2026 down to 29 million in 2031. There are a few items that are impacting this. First, the steep decline in 2030 that you see is attributed to a balloon debt payment for the Target Center of $16 million that could be negotiated in forthcoming years to smooth out. Additionally, this assumes no debt issuance for the convention center in the 5-year plan, which would be unlikely, but is still being determined through the development of the downtown assets finance plan. Finally, revenues are performing strong, and they're attributing to that increase expectation even beginning in 26 and 2027. A few items that could change this picture. We continue to monitor gross and net receipts alongside our development finance team and the convention center to ensure we're forecasting estimates grounded in the best available data. Additionally, as the Tourism Improvement District moves forward, it is quite likely that there will be a correlated impact to these revenues. Finally, on the expense side, any increased economic development funding in the general fund supported by these revenues has a very real and cumulative impact to the health of this fund. While it's certainly permissible given state statutes, there will come a time when it's no longer sustainable for these assets. Now we'll focus exclusively on the general fund, but excluding interfund transfers and use of fund balance to really focus on the outputs of our forecasting process. The outlook for 2026 remains slightly positive. Specifically, we're forecasting 7% year-over-year growth from 615 to 659 million. You'll notice this differs from the 3.64% that we saw earlier in the presentation, and that's because this is focusing on a subset of total revenues, primarily not using the use of fund balance, which earlier was presented. So this year we saw a few notable increases and decreases. First, I'll go over the increases. The first of those comes from the charges for services and sales, which are up by 1.8 million. This growth is largely driven by revenue from the park board for their use of city services. In the past, we've kept this charge artificially low, which meant the tax levy was subsidizing those services. This year, we partnered with the Comptroller's Office to better align or right-size those charges and clarify which services are included, and those conversations continue. It's important to note that initially this number was 2.7, and that was dropped down to 1.8, and any future adjustments will have a direct impact on the tax levy. Moving into fines and forfeits, this is attributable to a Public Works and Reg Services-led pilot around speeding citation revenue, which is set to go live August 1st of this year. There are restrictions around eligible uses for that revenue. It's primarily within traffic safety operations and traffic calming. On the flip side, with notable decreasing revenues, Franchise fees collections were under by about $3 million in 2024. So to dampen our expectations going forward, the 26 outlook has reduced to align with our 2025 forecast. Then in licenses and permits, this is primarily the CPED code construction services around development activity. These were reduced by about $2.5 million from plan. And these are driven, as I mentioned, through development activity. And so we monitor the Planning Commission approvals as they serve as a lead indicator for these revenues. In 2023, we had the lowest projects dating back to 2012 at about 29 projects. Unfortunate to say, in 2024, that was dropped to 12 projects in total. So we continue to monitor this activity and we'll adjust that revenue stream as needed. Diving into the forecasted figures a bit more, this is the taxes category within the general fund. And property taxes account for roughly 88% of this category and 53% of general fund revenues. This equates to currently $376 million planned for 26. The property tax revenue forecast shown here currently follows the 5-year financial direction that was documented in the 2025 adopted budget. As Director DeSenza mentioned, this was 6.8% in 2025, 10.8% in 26. It's important to note that under the CSL that we are seeing today, we would need to increase that to 11.2% to balance, as was shown earlier. Again, these figures account for no new unplanned spending, as well as alternate revenue sources and or prioritization of CSL programs. The final revenue category we'll discuss today are intergovernmental revenues, which are the second largest revenue source in the general fund. Additionally, local government aid accounts for roughly 10% of general fund revenue and 84% of this category. After some slight concern at the Capitol earlier this year with reductions to local government aid, we're pleased to see that that is being forecasted to held flat. So we are estimating to get about $72 million in local government aid. Also important to note that this is spread out amongst the city, the park board, and the municipal building commission. This is revenue that gets certified in July or August, so sometimes we do see modifications as we get closer to that certification, but we are in consultation with our IGR team to confirm that we're forecasting these appropriately. Okay, so to bring all this together, today we started by looking at expense category trends, including personnel and internal service funds. We also touched on the base budget and how we keep costs flat at the department level. From there, we walked through our major revenue sources, and now looking at both revenues and expenditures, it's clear that we're not currently in balance, even with the planned 10.8% levy increase. I will mention, as was mentioned before, it's a lot more modest than we saw last year. This view includes all planned interfund transfers and the use of cash for one-time expenditures, as was adopted in the current year's financial plan. What you're seeing here reflects the balanced 2025 budget adopted in last December, and the projected plan for 26 through 2031. As a reminder, the general fund is the most flexible part of the city's budget, where policymakers spend much of their time making key decisions. While recent years benefited from significant federal and state dollars, we now face continued uncertainty around inflation, tariffs, and the tapering of federal funding. This environment calls for a more cautious and strategic approach to financial planning. Over the next several months, our office will work closely with the mayor and with Budget Committee leadership in the fall to develop a balanced, recommended, and ultimately final budget. Unlike previous years, we're not starting from the current service level as the baseline. Instead, we are using this as a reference point while we focus on prioritizing core services. This year, there was no open call for new spending proposals to departments. The city is committed to limiting financial risk and ensuring that Minneapolis remains an affordable place to live. Our focus now will be on pulling every available lever to maximize ongoing revenues and using those estimates to align spending with city priorities. In contrast to prior years since the pandemic, this year our conversation will center on how to close the gap, reducing the property tax increase, and achieving a balanced budget by August. With that, I'll wrap up with a brief look at the timeline ahead as we move towards adoption in December. So here's what we have in the pipeline for the budget process over the next several months. Today, we've presented the current service level as our early estimate of revenues and expenditures. In June and July, department budget submissions are currently being reviewed and presented to the mayor for decision-making. In August, the mayor's recommended budget will be formally released. In September, our office will return to provide an overview of the recommended budget, and the Budget Committee will begin hearing department presentations through October and November. This is also when public hearings on the budget generally take place. Finally, in December, the process concludes with budget markup and formal adoption. We look forward to working with you all as we move through this process and work towards a balanced 26 budget. And with that, we will stand for questions.
Captioners can continue past 6. Commissioner Benny?
I do have a quick question, and actually, that was very helpful, that presentation. Could you go back in the slides a little bit? I don't know, they went off the screen. But I have to always ask the park board questions. It was the charges for services, and the park board one is going up, and I know that isn't a discussion between the staff. But, so you said that they historically have been kept historically low, like, and the city's taking a bigger look at maybe the ways in which the park board should be paying a different share of support to the city, is that?
Yeah, to the President, Commissioner Bene. From my understanding, I've been with the department about 2 years, but from my understanding, looking at that model, I think historically there's been some assumptions made of which other funds in the city, other agencies, what services they're using. Mm-hmm. And with the new leadership in the Controller's Office, we've worked to itemize those and have ongoing conversations of which services there's agreement of that are being utilized.
Yeah, okay. And I think that there's maybe, I've had a little insight into that. The one thing you said something about also looking at then the levy not carrying that, if the park board's portion's being artificially sort of subsidized, that has a negative effect on the levy. Is that what you said, or?
Yeah, through the President, Commissioner Bene. Yes, that's correct. So if those costs are not recouped through the various entities that we charge out for the overhead costs, then those are covered by the tax levy.
Okay, so the numbers I've seen right now, it's going up almost 100%. It's close. It's in the 90s, I believe. But I would just say this, the park board only has the mechanism of paying those fees, really, with the levy as well. So it still would be the same impact, wherever those fees are paid, if it's money given to the park board to pay the fee, or the park board or the city pays the fee. It's just kind of a wash. But, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Payne.
Thank you, President Brandt. Building on the internal service charges, I'd actually really be interested in seeing the methodology, and specifically I'm interested in understanding what the cost drivers are. I'm assuming it's activity-based accounting. And, ideally I'd love to see, we have the 5-year projection here of the total cost pools for each of the internal service charges. I'd love to see how those cost drivers map out by department. That might be a bigger ask, but just at least seeing the methodology and the cost drivers would be really helpful for me.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Chutai.
Thank you, Mr. President. Similar to Commissioner Bene, I always think it's a little bit silly when we talk about the internal service charges, just being recouping costs and preventing them from becoming a property tax burden, but we charge them to departments who pay them out of money that is supported by the levy, and that's as true for any department as it is for the park board. So I mean, it all balances out in the end, but it let's not, I just think it's going a little far to say that this money isn't property tax supported in one way or another. I would be curious about just getting a deeper understanding, and I think I would imagine you're going to come and present the current service level presentation to the budget committee at a future date, as you do every year. And so, I'm happy to wait to get a response to this until you come to us, so not urgent. But I'd love to see some detailing about, the increases to the IT budget go from 2023 to now. I would imagine the ERP program is a driving factor of that, but would just love to see some further details about where this is going. I'd love to understand why we saw a 30% increase to the property services allocation from 2024 to 2026. Over 2 years, that seems very significant to me. I'd love to understand how liability and self-insurance has changed pre-2020 to now. And would be really curious to understand where there may be vacancies in staff in each of these internal service funds. So perhaps that can be a part of helping drive reductions to the internal service budget, and how significant it is, and how much it's grown over the years. And then finally, I'd say I would love to understand better. There's one more thing on internal service charges, and I honestly can't remember right now. Going back to a previous slide, I think it was slide 13, where you. Moving from here, I have it pulled up in front of me. It was when you're talking about the methodology of general fund CSL expense budget 2026. CSL includes these changes, so it's, I believe, the one right after this. Yep. Can you help me understand discretionary base held flat? Like, what does that mean?
Yes, absolutely. Through the President, Commissioner Chuktai. So the discretionary base, in all intents and purposes, is any non-personnel expending within those departments. So we do not grow those. In some cities, you'll inflate those year over year. We do not grow those because per financial policies, the goal is for the mayor and the council to review those against all other requests. So those are held flat for general fund departments each year in the current service level budget. We only redo the personnel recalculation and internal service charges.
So we should anticipate that when departments come to present their budgets, they'll detail their discretionary based budgets and explain those so that we can meet the obligation of financial policies and actually review their discretionary based budgets.
Through the President, Commissioner, certainly whenever there's changes to the overall dollar amount, that's when we see those budget proposals, or formerly known as change items. That is how we comply with that policy, so that there's a full discussion around those increases before they're adopted.
Sounds good. That sounds great. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I had a few. I was struck by the new leases in property services being a cost driver. Is that because we are needing more space, so we're adding additional square footage to house, say, additional personnel, or is it predominantly rising per square foot charges?
Yeah, President Brandt, so there's a number of new leases that have come on for Fire, Century Plaza, and that is driving those costs.
So basically different spaces that are coming on?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep. Mhm.
And are the square footage charges the city pays for rented space generally benefiting from the down real estate market downtown?
President Brandt, I do not have the answer to that, but we could find that out.
Okay.
And work with our property services department.
All right. And talking about real estate costs brings up, in my mind, from the Click days, the plan when the new building was completed, kitty corner from City Hall, to dispose of this building and the City of Lakes building. Last time I think I inquired about this, I was told it's not a good time to sell, but I'm wondering if there's any progress being made in that regard, particularly now that we can see moving back into the third floor on the horizon.
President Brandt, I know Finance is really excited. I think we're moving at the end of July back to City Hall. My understanding is that this chamber will be maintained, and so that will require this building not being sold for, I'm not sure what the timing is on that. And then City of Lakes, once that's fully empty, I think that will be revisited as well.
Okay, not to put this on your shoulders, but it feels a little bit like a bait and switch when part of the financing plan for the building at the opposite end of City Hall from where we are now was sold on getting income from the disposal of those two buildings. There's no space in, and again, this is probably a council space allocation decision that's not within my hands, but you would think that in a building that big, there would be meeting spaces that could serve the purposes that, for example, this meeting space would use so that we could realize some of the cash that was part of the financing plan for that building. And that's maybe a comment. I don't know if you...
I think the only thing I'll say, President Brandt, is that it certainly is true that the downtown market is not what it was prior to COVID. And so certainly if we're going to dispose of properties, we'd want to make sure we're getting the most value. But, I defer maybe to our commissioners or perhaps the city clerk on the use of this particular chamber.
Okay. And then, all right, Commissioner Jutek, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to address your question about these chambers. So the City Hall across the street, where we historically have met, you are correct, it's a large building. There's a lot of space in it. It is also a building that we share with Hennepin County, owned by the Municipal Building Commission. And there are significant portions of that building that are occupied by either the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office or other functions, the jail, the juvenile detention facility, et cetera. A part of the consideration, and I can appreciate that this is in part maybe a council decision, but it is one that is largely driven by both the city clerk, who you're correct does report to the council, and property services, who reports to the mayor ultimately. A large part of the reason is because certain types of meetings, including the Board of Estimate and Taxation and all Tier 1 boards and commissions, require those meetings to be broadcast live, include closed captioning. One of the significant challenges that we run into in carrying out our full-time jobs, which is serving as members of the council, and doing our work at the committee level, is time constraints that come from when committee meetings need to end, so that evening meetings, such as the BET, but not the BET alone, the Planning Commission, et cetera, can continue their meetings. That also has a pretty significant burden on clerks and attorneys that you see sitting over here that are nonpartisan professional staff who have to turn around a room in a matter of minutes and don't get a break because they have to keep the record of our meetings. And so, it creates a pretty significant staffing challenge within the clerk's office. It creates a pretty significant problem with captioning services, but more than anything else, when we can't complete our business because we need to vacate the chambers, right? When you walked in today, you saw the Commissioner Payne's laptop and materials sitting here. It's because he had committee right before this. And it went until we started here. So, that's what was being weighed, from the way I understand it, by our clerk and by the property services director, and I don't think it's the incorrect conclusion, to maintain the space so that we can continue for all of us to do the business that we were elected to or appointed to complete.
Okay, I hope I was clear enough. I wasn't suggesting that the functions that are currently here be handled in City Hall, which, as you say, is a shared building, but in the further building, the Public Service building, which I hope gets a new name so we can eliminate some of the confusion in the future. But thank you for that. Appreciate that. I would like to do a time check right now. First of all, do we have an extension from our captioners?
Mr. President, we do not yet, but she is working on seeing if it's possible.
All right. I see two items on the agenda today that are sort of must-do things. The item that Commissioner Priest-Stenson has brought up to substitute the clerk in the information request process, and then also the authorization of the staff to the authorization of the staff training, a budget amendment. I don't know that I would be, in an ideal world, we'd tackle and work our way through at least some parts of the work plan discussion. But does anybody have a thought on what's the pleasure of the group? Commissioner Priest-Stenson?
If we're not able to get to actually approving the work plan today, I do think that there is some discussion to level set some things in order to keep things going smooth for our staffer, Christina Keiderling, as well as for ourselves. Some things that came up during my leading the onboarding process with her that I just don't see would be wise for us to wait until the June 25th meeting. So at least a basic discussion to make sure that we're all on the same page about the difference between somebody's job description and the work plan and where we're at and what we're able to ask of our staffer. I would at least like to be able to talk about that even if we can't full on get to approving the work plan.
All right.
Mr. President, we just got a response from the captioner, and they are able to stay until 6:30.
Wonderful. That helps. Let's proceed. I have a few more questions. One is about and I know I tend to extend meetings with them, the lost revenues. That's a healthy picture. There's a rebound, as was predicted after the pandemic waned. Can some of that be transferred over to help subsidize the general fund to a greater degree? I know that's not holding current conditions level, which is the purpose of this document. And then you mentioned in the next page, of course, that the fund balance for the Downtown Asset Fund is projected to decline, although there's a caveat that the payment could be, the balloon payment could be re-amortized. But if you could address the question of a greater degree of subsidization from the lost revenues.
Yes, absolutely, President Brandt. So within I think I'll start with the categories of lost revenues. So the entertainment tax is the most general purpose revenue of those revenues. So currently that, I mentioned the general fund transfer, I think we're all relatively familiar with it. The full amount of entertainment taxes are currently booked to go over to the general fund each year. In addition to that, within the stipulations and state statutes, any economic development related activity can be funded by the remaining of those taxes. It's further down on the itemization of uses, first being operations and debt service within the assets, but economic development programs is also an opportunity. So we revisit the amount of programs in the general fund annually that would be applicable to that. And so that is a way that we can get additional revenues into the general fund. Beyond that, it does need to meet that threshold.
And I'm sorry, I may not have been listening carefully enough and thinking about my next question, but is there still economic activity not funded from these sources that could potentially be funded if more were shifted?
Just for a clarifying question, existing programs is what you're asking?
Yes.
We will look at that. I would say we do this annually, so I think it's rare that additional programs would be identified, but that is something that we look at every year.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. I'm not trying to be a council member here in budget spending, but I just wanted to know for purposes of the levy. And is my understanding correct that the expansion of the downtown taxing district to include all of the North Loop failed this session?
Yes, that is my understanding.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that because I thought that was low-hanging fruit. But the legislature in its wisdom. And of course, the drawdown in salt would be affected should there be a proposal potentially affected if there were a proposal put on the table for a new basketball arena and a request that some of the downtown entertainment and so on taxes be used for that purpose. All right. And trying to move through quickly. And I think that's it. Thank you very much for this presentation. Any further questions? Thank you. I'm going to go back and listen to this at least once more and maybe twice. All right. Thank you. The clerk will receive and file this presentation. And would people mind if we skipped to the number 9, which is the passage of a resolution amending the 2025 budget resolution to reallocate unused salary funds, and to explain the purpose of this is to allow our staffer to begin some training activities this year that will ease her transition from her expertise in various things that she handled at the federal level to a more municipally oriented set of skills using training that's specific to Minnesota. I wondered if I could have a motion before we have discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All right. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay? Okay. Oh, wait a minute. That was a resolution, so we need to do a roll call, correct? I'm learning.
This is the vote for Resolution 2025-0007. Commissioner Fry is absent. Abene.
Aye.
Payne.
Aye.
Chugtai.
Aye.
Vice President Priest-Stinson.
Aye.
President Brandt.
Aye.
There are 5 ayes.
All right, thank you. And item 12, I just want to skip around a little bit in the interest of getting things we need to take care of taken care of, is the transmittal of capital projects that have been approved by the council, for which the board will consider approving the issuance of tax-exempt general obligation bonds at a future meetings. Wondered if I could have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion is approved. This was that one meeting?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
But I'd like to speak my intention of what I talked about today.
Great. All right. We will now move to item number 11 for an update.
I'd like to defer this to the June 25th meeting, but I do want to express my intention to my colleagues that this item is going to be we'll get to it in the budget portion today, but my intention is that we vote on the possibility of adding para for 2026. As well as some impact for 2025. I'd like to talk about the pay for BET as it relates to additional duties with supervision and vice president responsibilities, as there's none now, and I have some suggestions. So just wanted to name that intention so that folks are prepared for what that discussion will be about generally, and folks don't feel blindsided about what this item is about, but I do feel that's appropriate to move to June 25th.
Okay, and the clerk will take note for the June 26th agenda. We now also have in front of us the amendments to the BET information request memo instruction, and I would like to dispose of that one today so that we can do what we want to do moving forward. And Commissioner Priest-Stinson was the one who noticed this and suggested we bring it forward, and I thank her for putting it on the agenda. Do you want to introduce it?
Yes. Oh, we are going to talk about it.
Yeah, I think we can get it approved.
Okay,
relatively
it's a
quick.
quick squeeze. Really, I just want, what I am suggesting is that we move what we already adopted and how we said we're going to do it, that we move it over to our now staffer, with the addition of, and we'll get to that when we talk in the work plan, that they're able to develop a process that works for us for this body. They'll follow it as it is, but I would like to see some recommendations come for how that might work a little bit better for them in their role than how it worked within the clerk's office, which made sense in that iteration. But the bigger thing is just moving as it's written now, for the clerk's office to handle the follow-up, essentially, which is what is happening, to move that over to our now staffer, Ms. Keiderly.
Okay. And the amendment, proposed amendment is in the board agenda. Is there any other discussion? Commissioner Benny.
I'm really, thank you, President Brandt. I'm really grateful for this change, and this was some of my concern last year when we adopted this process. So I think this makes it much more streamlined, particularly because of the lead time we might have to interact and ask questions. A lot of, especially the budget stuff, is being worked on. I think the ink is basically drying when it's brought to us usually. So I think this is a great move.
All right, any other discussion? Wondered if I could have a motion to adopt the amendment?
So moved.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion passes. We now are down to the budget update and the work plan. My thought is that the budget update could probably wait till our next meeting. We're not in any dire need of dealing with that today, and it would be nice to have some consensus on at least certain aspects of the staff work plan so that our staff can move ahead. I'm sure she's doing a lot right now just to get her feet on the ground, but it would be nice to have some consensus. And I need to bring up the work plan matter and some of the ideas that are there. There are some things that might be more than we want to take on today. And I wonder if Christina, if you would be willing to go ahead and lead your presentation.
Absolutely. I'll try to go quickly, especially because I think this discussion is going, sorry, President Brand, are you okay if I begin?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll try to move quickly, especially because I think the majority of this presentation is actually less of a presentation and more of a discussion between the commissioners about what they want to be the long-term goals of the research arm of the staffer position. However, I'll just give you a little bit of background. Over the last couple weeks, I met with each of you, and for those who I couldn't meet with, I met with your staff to go over some of your research priorities and what you had dreamed and envisioned for both the scope of the BET and for the staff role and your expectations of me. So while this isn't changing anything on the JAQ, it's not changing my day-to-day responsibilities, it is defining the research priorities that were a large portion of my job responsibilities. So it's identifying what those things are that you would like researched. Overall, there were some similarities between each of the commissioners, but there are definitely varying ideas of thought. Before I get into specifically what some of those ideas are, I'll show you some guiding principles that we need to remember. I know many of you brought these up at your March meeting, so I don't mean to remind you, but just some guiding principles we can keep in mind.
So number one, requirements for success. The role of the BET requires an ongoing healthy relationship with the city attorney's office. That's due to the idea surrounding what can the staffer investigate and what can't they. City attorney's office has been very helpful to me. We're definitely facilitating a great healthy relationship, but just a reminder to everyone that we're going to need to continue that because a lot of these questions of whether or not the staffer can do research will have to be funneled through the city attorney's office. Secondly, the staffer requires the ability to request information, join working groups, participate in joint task forces, and which is essential to avoiding duplicative efforts. You'll see on the next slide, actually, when we talk about the different research ideas that different council member or commissioners had, different city departments are undertaking some of these to a varying degree. So it's not so much that we need to do each of these research projects from scratch, but we need to allow the staffer to facilitate some of these discussions and be on some of these task force and meetings so that they can bring back to you information that might already be into existence and put it into a way that's understandable to the BET and highly relatable to you. So it's just making sure that we facilitate those different discussions with other city departments to make sure that we're not duplicating work. Finally, a review may be needed for how information is presented to departments by the BET. This isn't necessarily as relatable to this conversation, but something that was brought up to me by one particular commissioner's office was a little bit different than what I had seen discussed here previously. Previously, it had been discussed that city staff are redoing presentations for the BET that they're already doing for other for example, the city council. And so it was the idea that maybe they do an amended version or an abridged version to just give their presentation towards the BET specifically. However, when I spoke to that commissioner's office, it was more the idea that the BET could go and review those meetings via YouTube and that those staff presenters would only be here to answer questions. Not saying we have to tackle that today, but I just wanted to let you know there are varying thoughts for how should city staff members come here and present to you so that we're best using their time. So it was another thing that was brought up that I thought should come to your attention. As for the research discussion topics that I think you all need to take back and decide what your priorities are. President Brandt, as you know, had the BET work plans memo from back in March that had several items, but the two that he and I really seemed to focus on was the analysis of alternative sources of revenue to decrease reliance on city property tax. There is already an effort by the city council to explore this issue. It's not exactly in scope to how President Brandt had worded it. However, it is very similar. They are exploring things such as an income tax. Their self-imposed deadline for this information was July 1st of 2025. So my ask would be if we make this a priority, the first step in that is going to be me getting with the research arm of the city council to find out what information they uncovered or if it's still in progress, if that due date has maybe changed. Along that line of thinking as well, President Brandt and I had a conversation with our attorney, Mr. Hammer, as to whether or not the BET could independently do this. I'll let President Brandt speak to some of his thoughts about whether we could or we could not. It does pull into question whether or not the BET on our own could explore this issue or if we would need to partner in some way with City Council or another city department. The second thing that President Brandt had in our discussion was an analysis of major cost drivers in city budget growth. I have heard this repeated several times tonight when budget was giving their presentation. I heard it from Commissioner Payne and Commissioner Chugtai. That seems to be a pretty consistent want because it was repeated again tonight. For Vice President Priest-Stinson, as she spoke earlier, she would like me to look into para availability and employer costs for BET elected officials. That's something that I think the turnaround time on could be pretty quick. If not for the next meeting, certainly the meeting after that could be a presentation. I don't think that's going to require as long and a multi-month study as maybe some of the others. So I think we could knock that out pretty quickly. And then finally, Commissioner Payne would like an analysis of other cities' responses to downtown devaluation, which again, I do think ties back to that budget presentation. If you were not mentioned on here, it's because you didn't have any specific research projects for me, which is totally okay, but these are some of the ones that came up that I wanted to present to the board. This is going to be more of a conversation between you all to decide where you'd like to start in your priorities, but I am certainly here for any questions if you have them for me.
Thank you for the presentation. I would like to lead off a bit here because The two topics I put forward in the document that the staff just reviewed are obviously big deals. And I think they would need a lot of discussion before we put them in the work plan. And I don't want to step on the council's toes here in ways that and interfere with work that they are already doing that would be disruptive. Just to elaborate on what Christina and I had by way of discussion with Mr. Hammer, he was fairly firm that the BET on its own could not do that, initiate and carry out that analysis of alternative sources of revenue for a variety of reasons related to sort of analysis of the charter. And however, he did tell us that it would be possible to do that kind of research if a memorandum of agreement was reached between the BET and the City Council, if that would be helpful. And that would provide some additional research capability to what has already been launched by the City Council. But I want to take that off the table tonight because I think that's a complicated discussion and I need to know more about what the council is doing. And the analysis of the cost drivers in the city budget growth, I have ideas there about doing something similar to what the city of St. Paul has, I should say, was recently done concerning the city of St. Paul budget by a group of outside folks, including a former city budget director, a prominent developer, a former business editor of the St. Paul paper. And, but, you know, it raises the question of whether we want our staff to potentially staff an external analysis of city budget growth, or whether it should be internal and external participants or entirely internal. So I'd like to pull those off the table for tonight. And my feeling is that the two items, specific items that are remaining here, and putting aside all the smaller ones that I had in my earlier memo, are ones that it'd be nice to get some discussion on so that Christina has some direction to go forward if there is consensus that these are items that we would like her to go forward on. So with that, I've said enough. Commissioner Priest-Stinson.
Setting myself a 5-minute timer. I want to just clarify and recenter our discussion to make sure that we have agreement and understanding, one, around the word of research. I think we just need to be careful about the word that we're using to describe what we're talking about. I think there's a big difference. In fact, I know there's a big difference between research and just a pure information request. As elected officials, we have a right to ask our staffer questions that we might need answered in order to bring things to this board. I don't think that meets the definition that previously we heard when we were going back and forth about the conversation as staffer, that's giving direction. As other elected officials that are here have staff that they ask questions of in order to be able to get information to make decisions. So I think we need to differentiate between asking an informational request of Christina versus asking them to do full-blown research on a subject. I think that's a big difference. And what I don't want is for us to, forget myself for the moment. What I don't want is for our staffer to feel like they're in a position where they can't answer our questions because they're worried that somehow they're breaking an open meeting law or they're going against what's in their work plan. That's not the intention of a work plan. The point of having a work plan is the job description is the job description. We voted on that and we know what that is and that. But the difference is the job description is outlining the what and the general duties and the responsibilities and the expectations. It's fixed. The work plan, however, outlines the how, the when, and the what. So that's what this work plan should be. If it's including other things other than that, it wouldn't be appropriate for a work plan. That's not what a work plan is. There should be specific goals, deliverables, there should be timelines, there should be focus areas that are given for a period. It's something that's dynamic and it prioritizes the shift, or as new needs emerge, it allows for us to be able to address for those in real time through the work plan. It is also a complement or a part of the onboarding that they're getting direction from us, especially in the first year within their role. It's also the way that we monitor for accountability. We've already chosen the right person for the right role. We've done that part, check. But the work plans are how we hold Christina accountable, but it's also how we hold ourselves accountable if things are not going to what we decided here. I also want to talk briefly just about the professional development piece. The work plan is also part of the professional development. We are an independent board. Christina is not an independent person. She is an employee of this city. And so it's part of professional development to have things built into the work plan for that as well. That is also part of the plan of the work. This will tie into performance evaluation as well. And then work plans also reflect our organizational strategy. So it's also a transparency piece to this. There's equity in it, and I spoke to the transparency. So if we want to lead with that kind of clarity and accountability and care, which we've said that we do, we need to move beyond the job description, and now we're getting into this piece to outline the things that I described. And I have a few things that I would like to add to the work plan that are not there, specifically para. I do agree with Christina, she is correct. This is a small, there's really two things that she's looking into. Dan might actually be able to answer one of them. I'm past my 5 on the explanation piece, but I have my questions now. One of them is whether we are considered a non-governing body. The answer to that question determines some things about para, like which plan. So just knowing whether we're considered a non-governing body, that's a quick one. You may already know, Dan, but that would be something to ask specifically of the para folks. The other thing that would need to be presented to us is because there are 2 types of para. There's a type that's just a 401k where we're just giving on our own. There's another type that's the pension plan, which could have up to a 5% match. So if we were going to do that specifically for the 2 people that are elected, we would want to have the information on if it was 2 staff, what would that cost us at the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5% versus if it's only 1 person that wanted to opt in, what would that cost us, so that we have the information to make that decision if we choose to enact that as well. So we would need that information. I'd like to get it into the work plan or just decide that she could do that today. I don't think we're going to get to approving the work plan. And then the last thing that I want to say about the work plan is the very bottom, which is the part that President Brandt has been talking with City Attorney about quite a bit for a while now, is around the research part. I think the more appropriate way to describe what we're asking our staffer to do is to investigate, to coordinate with other departments. That could be intergovernmental, with the Parks Board. It could be some work with the state. It could be interdepartmental, working with the auditor or someone else, and coordinating what is needed for us, creating process if there isn't any. And then the last piece is the participating piece. An example was given earlier about a work group that you're supposed to be part of anyways, but there could be other work groups that you could be a part of, and that can be your way of getting the information but not doing the research, is by the participation piece. So those are the 4 words for me: investigate, coordinate, the process creation where there is none, and the participation piece. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Priest-Stinson. I was actually hoping we could find a couple of bits of low-hanging fruit in the next 20 minutes to give to our staffer in advance of adopting a well-defined work plan, so that we can keep her fully occupied, at least through our next meeting. Commissioner Priest-Stinson, I was hoping that perhaps PERA availability and employer costs could be something that we could today authorize our staff to research. I will not be participating in PERA in part because of age and because I don't need it financially. but I fully understand why Vice President Priest-Stinson, with previous city service credit, would want that investigated. Can we give informal direction to our staff member today that she should proceed and see what the options are and report back to us if possible at our next meeting? But if it takes longer than that, it can take longer than that. Is that a consensus? All right, good. Consider yourself commissioned. Commissioner Payne, would you like to bring up your item of analysis of other cities' responses to downtown devaluation? Or do you think that's something that you'd like, would you like to get that started now?
I mean, I can speak to it. I think our conversation covered a lot of the same topics that yours did. I brought back up the commitments that we made around pursuing alternative revenue sources, so it's good to see that featured here. A lot of the conversation we actually had was around the role of BET, the role of City Council, the separation and independence of the two, how we're staffing up our legislative department, and just kind of giving just the overall orientation of all of the changes under the new government structure with strong mayor. And so I think I'm actually really interested in maybe a follow-up conversation with Mr. Hammer around thoughts on, because it's good to have clear lanes. I don't want to create barriers for you feeling productive and helping serve our community. And I think that even some of these topics like municipal revenue, we have staff that are working on it right now. I doubt anybody would say, no, we don't want an additional set of eyes or expertise like assisting here. So if that's something that needs to be formalized, I'm happy to have that conversation. And other ways of how we're building out our policy and research area in the legislative department. So, I mean, I think your specific question is, I don't know that there's a sense of urgency on this question. I feel like every one of these topics is like a boiling, simmering issue that is going to be with us for quite some time. And, you know, I would probably more defer to Ms. Ketterling on just capacity and, you know, not trying to overload as you're just finding out where the bathrooms are.
Commissioner Payne, do I hear you saying that you'd be willing to pull this off and consider it later as part of the larger work plan discussion, the downtown devaluation issue?
I'm saying I am indifferent.
Okay, all right. I think it would be good, to the extent we can, to consider them all together. And I want to say, and I think I heard an invitation, would it be helpful for you and me and Mr. Hammer and perhaps Vice President Priest-Stinson to, and perhaps Councilmember Walmsley is, I think, the person who has initiated the discussion on the council side, to sit down and just talk about where you're headed, help me understand it, see if there's any things that it would be helpful to have a BET staffer participating in?
Yeah, I think that's a wise thing to do, and maybe I don't know that we need to make formal amendments to this, but like, you know, that would be a great thing to lead on, is like, let's figure out the definition of how these two different staff capacities actually interface with each other and how that might be formalized.
And
I was just gonna
I'm ready to do it. Commissioner Priest-Stinson?
I was just going to say that this is a great example of JAQ versus work plan. This isn't something that needs to go in the work plan. This is something covered in the JAQ, that meeting can happen and we can do all of that. And we really don't need to add it to the work plan. So that was my reason for giving my stump speech on the difference between the two, because we're ready to rock and roll with that, and it's not a work plan item.
Right.
I'm sorry, I may have missed your point, but you're saying which is not a...
But my point is that meeting can happen because in the JAQ as it's written, it's part of her job to participate in these types of things, and this is a regular city business meeting that we would need to have. So
Right.
we don't need to, in my opinion, and I think there's a consensus here, we don't need to add it to the work plan or get consensus on that. It's just part of the work.
All
So
right.
we can proceed.
I follow you. Thank you. All right. Do we want to continue this discussion to another day when we are not perhaps quite as pressed for time? All right. We have dealt with everything except the draft budget, at least preliminarily, and I think we agreed to defer that by one meeting. And so unless there are any updates or additional items to come before the board, are people agreed that we can adjourn? All right. Seeing no objection, we'll adjourn.